Hello and welcome back. This is Astere Sophia Kairos, and I'm here with Krista from Practical Astros. Hi, Krista.
Hi there.
We are back with your weekly astrology forecast, and we're looking at the 17th to the 24th of September, and we have a busy week ahead for you.
Yeah. On the ride back home, there was some new graffiti on the back side of a road sign that just someone wrote "thrice great," and I was like, "What?" A
Nice.
little Hermes wink.
I wonder if they knew what they were saying. That's so cool. For us, it's only thrice great Hermes.
Yeah.
Um, but I wonder if they meant, oh, I have to know now. I'll have to
Yeah,
check
I'll grab a picture of it
confirmation.
next time I drive by,
Yeah,
unless someone covers it up. But yeah, it was a little
yeah,
nice little wink.
yeah. Brilliant. How fantastic, especially this week because it just feels all about Hermes. Like one way or another, even Venus, she's entering his sign and just setting up that nice little mutual reception they've got going on now. So we're still all about Hermes. So we've got Mercury entering Libra, which is, of course, Venus's air sign. So although he's not got dignity here, he's losing his dignity from Virgo, where we've really enjoyed all of Mercury's best qualities, the exaltation and the dignity. But that's lost, but he's still in an air sign, so he's still bringing us the thoughts and the ideas, but in a Venusian way now, in a different kind of energy, a different kind of way. It's going to be opposite Neptune, and that's a really interesting signature. I like to call it the astrologer's aspect. This is like one of my favorites because it's connecting. Mercury crosses those boundaries, and in a way, so does Neptune. Not in a way, Neptune is otherworldly.
Yeah, and somehow, in some ways, it does
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah. And then Venus enters Mercury's sign. It's like one door closes, another door opens. So they're not there together, which is always nice when they are. He leaves, he's not there to host her, but that sets up that mutual reception between the two of them working together. Mercury in Venus's sign and Venus in Mercury's sign. So that's still kind of nice. They're both working towards the same goals or sharing goals and helping each other. And then Venus in Virgo straight away is going to square Uranus in Gemini in Mercury's sign. So it's still keeping that flavor, but bringing in some unpredictability, some uncertainty, some disruption. And I've seen some articles writing this week about Mercury and Hermes and saying how much of a trickster he is and how disruptive and how people hadn't really fully understood that. But I think anybody that works closely with Mercury maybe does start to understand that, or how he doesn't communicate in a straightforward way, at
No.
least. That's certainly very clear if you start to work with him. And then the big one, the solar eclipse. This is the second part of eclipse season. We had the first on the 7th, and then the second one in Virgo is a little bit more challenging than the first one has been. It's right at the last degree, 2859, just getting to that anaretic degree. And the sun in Virgo is going to be opposite Saturn in Pisces. Literally, these are the wrong way round, but at 5:45, the sun is in that opposition, and then the solar eclipse is hours later at 17:43. So we just got that same day on the 21st. That Saturn opposition is flavouring the quality of that eclipse, just making it a bit more challenging. Whereas the 7th, we had a trine to Jupiter, the ruler of the eclipse. So that was bringing in a lot more benefic energy, whereas this time we've got an opposition to a malefic. 22nd, Mars enters Scorpio. Mars loves being in Scorpio. This is its watery, feminine home. It's back. We were talking about that long road, that dusty road that Mars has been traveling. It's just that feeling of, yeah, can unpack, can get ready, can review everything and just get its ducks in a row, I think, when they're home. Aries is its other home, and that's fiery. But I somehow feel that it's quite comfortable in Scorpio too. I think each of the planets has a home where they're more happy, and probably Mars is happier in Aries because that's yang and fiery.
I would say that Mars is happier in Scorpio because Mars is the night sect,
Mm.
malefic, and Scorpio is that kind of feminine, dark night sect sign that, Mars, we might associate Mars's significations with more Aries-like, but I think it prefers Scorpio.
Yeah, that's why I was struggling to put my finger on it.
Yeah,
That's exactly why.
yeah.
Yeah. And then the sun enters Libra. We begin Libra season, but that kicks off that cardinality and the turning of the wheel of the year as well. Is it Mabon, the
Yep.
festival? And of course, the sun then the next day goes straight into an opposition with Neptune. So that's going to be a lot. We're going to break it down for you and show you the links between them, but it's a busy week.
Yeah, and because next week you can see over there in the corner, there's really only one aspect that we're going to talk about. Next week, we will still be dealing with all of the effects of this current week. So, especially with eclipses, a lot of times what comes from the eclipse isn't dealt with on that day. You might see the omen or you might see it, but you kind of extract it over a longer period of time. So there is a lot of shifting. We'll get into it when we look at the charts, but the sun entering a cardinal sign signals the turning of the light, the turning of the wheel. And that just by nature really changes the story. Cardinal is that hinge of like movement forward. So whenever the sun enters one of those, it really kind of moves everything forward. It also happens to coincide with Mercury and Venus, and then the aspect to Uranus. On top of all that, the opposition to Saturn, opposition to Neptune. And then on top of that, we have the eclipse. But the eclipse itself, like we're in the eclipse window now as you're hearing this, because the first eclipse was last week or the week before, I guess, from when you're listening to it, the 7th. And, within this eclipse window, you're not really like necessarily sorting out the eclipse the week or the day or the hour that it happens. Sometimes you do get kind of hit over the head with the symbolism of it all. But a lot of what we'll probably be feeling is, Venus going into Virgo. Venus is in fall there because it's exalted, and Pisces, its opposing sign. Venus loses some of her dignity, and that just changes the story of how Venus can express. And she's squaring Uranus. So I feel like we're going to be feeling that more. Mercury leaving its domicile and exaltation of Virgo, hosting that Venus, hosting that Uranus. Like it's really going to be kind of this conflicting, busy season between that Mercury and that Venus. I feel like that is going to be more palpable than the eclipse itself. But again, eclipses, like they're very mysterious, and so we'll all get to witness what that actually looks like on the 21st. And the cool thing about this eclipse, this is the second new moon of Virgo in Virgo season this year, because we had the first new moon in Virgo back in August at 0 degrees, and this one is at basically 29 degrees. So we have these bookends of a new moon, and to me, that's a really special thing to pause and consider. Both of these new moons in Virgo for this year, this one is close enough to the nodes so that we get that eclipse effect. Just eclipses themselves can often be lessons that are thought and understood over more reflection and more time, not just the moment itself. Luckily, we are going to be teaching an eclipse workshop. By this time, it will have already passed, but we'll show a slide that shows that you can still get access to the recording and the workbook, because I feel like the second eclipse might cause us to really dive a little deeper into understanding how it's going to play out, because I do think it might be more difficult.
Yeah, because that's the thing with a benefic one. Usually it's more ease and gentleness, and the Saturn one, that's a bit more testing our limits, testing our boundaries. That naturally brings the challenges.
Let's look at the chart.
Yeah, we love a chart. And we see Mercury here newly entered into Libra, into the air Venusian temple of Venus. And I've completely forgotten now whether it's yin or yang.
Well, air is yang.
Yeah, Gemini is yang as well.
Yeah, earth and water are yin, fire and air are yang.
Yeah, that's just gone out of my head. So we can see how Mercury would feel a little bit at home here. There's some familiarity with the aims here for Venus. And then, as Krista said, Venus is in full here in Virgo because it's opposite. Why am I blanking?
No, it's opposite her exaltation of Pisces. So she exalts in Pisces. So imagine like when something is exalted, it's like on a throne. And then when it falls off the pedestal that it's been put on, it's fallen. So she exalts in Pisces, so she's fallen in Virgo.
Thank you. Brain farts. But it seems nice that she's there with the moon, just easing her through that doorway.
Yeah, and that's where the moon was earlier at that first new moon in Virgo, was that at that early degree. So it's nice that it's ushering her in again this second time around. It's been a month since the moon has been in this position, and so the fact that he's bringing Venus along with it is pretty sweet.
And that's what sets up this mutual reception. So we've got Venus in Mercury sign, Mercury in Venus's sign. So that's what we talk about when we say a mutual reception. And that's kind of like a holding hands across the signs, like they've got no sight of each other. So Mercury theoretically can't help Venus, and likewise. But the mutual reception of being in each other's signs is an indication of these shared goals and shared missions, and this want to help each other, this mutual aims when you're working towards a shared goal with somebody. It's kind of like you're working on the same project together, but you're not maybe meeting in the same place.
Yeah, there's also a little bit of contra indicia here too. If we look at that, the equinox point, so where the end of Virgo meets the beginning of Libra, similarly at the end of Pisces when it meets the beginning of Aries,
Yeah.
there is contra indicia. So there's this like secret opposition. It just has to do with the quality of light, because this is where the light begins to change. At the equinox points, we have like shared light. So, like the day before the summer solstice and the day after the summer solstice, they share light. So, there's kind of like a mutual, even playing field. But with the contra indicia, there's a little bit of one is kind of on top of the other, so to speak. And so there is contra indicia as soon as Venus moves into those early degrees of Virgo to that very late degree Mars and Libra. And it won't happen for very long. I think it just will be kind of a tense transition of Venus going into Virgo. It was, she's kind of, Venus has had a lot of difficulty as she's been traveling through. When she first entered into Leo, she immediately opposed Pluto. You know, she's, had a square to Mars. Like, Venus kind of gets beat up a little bit during this summer. And I think that there will be some Venusian lessons of wound and healing that come through with her being in that fallen place. Because the good thing about a fallen planet is that it becomes resourceful with the situation that it has, but it can represent just a little bit more scrappiness. And that contra indicia with Mars, until Mars goes into Scorpio pretty soon, this week, there will be like this, just like this grit, this tension that is happening between them. That I just, I feel like that's what we're going to feel, and maybe attribute to the eclipse. But the aspect itself, if the eclipse wasn't happening, these would still be happening, right? So this Venus in fall, and then Mars at almost at the anaretic degree in its place of exile before it goes home, isn't necessarily a happy character to be in that contention with the contra indicia. Luckily, it doesn't last for very long because both of them are moving fairly swiftly.
Yeah, but that'll be baked into the eclipse, won't it?
And she's squaring Uranus too, right?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a whole lot of weight for Venus to carry. I mean, she's usually quite light-hearted. We think of her as just bringing connection. But when she's dealing with those heavier issues, those things, Uranus bringing in that disruption. But it can also, I like it for bringing in new awakenings. And here in Virgo, when Krista's talking about that planet in fall and having to work a bit differently, that really chimes with the Uranus significations of, okay, we're going to do this. It's about acting differently, about acting out of the norm, like the outsider as well, the awakener, the disruptor, the rebellious nature. And that's kind of Venus in Virgo as well. It's like, this is not a trad wife. This is not that kind of thing. This is somebody who's going to make up her own rules and make those connections in her own kind of way. But it's not going to be what conventional society expects, and especially making that connection with Uranus as well.
Yeah, what it reminds me of is like if you've ever gone camping for more than a couple of days at a time, at a certain point, you can't really care that your clothes are ash on them and you haven't put makeup on, you haven't really been able to do your hair. You've got dirt under your fingernails and you're kind of tired because you're sleeping on the ground and you're waking and falling with the sun, and your antenna is up because you hear animals at night. It's like all these things. But after a couple of days, you get into this kind of natural order rhythm of life. And then it's like it becomes a different layer of beauty. And if you're camping with other people, they also start to reveal themselves to be this like really gritty, humble, like kind of laughable, because everyone is kind of, all their facade and their glamour has fallen away. Like they're just like their earthy selves, and like that sort of humble and true beauty. That's kind of how I imagine Venus and Virgo. Venus and Virgo in modern world, it can often be like really meticulous, beautiful taste, really excellent quality, wanting things to be clean and put in order and all that, that also exists. But in a situation where you aren't in control of the weather or you're not in a climate controlled building, if you're just like really in the earth, there's still beauty that comes out of that. And that is another end of that Venus in Virgo. And that may we all kind of see that humble, gritty beauty that she can reveal in our own lives, whether we go camping for a couple days or not. It's just like that's what it reminds me of.
That's so nice because there's that archetype of the maiden, but she carries the scythe. This isn't the typical maiden who's going to be innocent and blushing in a corner. This is a maiden who's ready to cut and work hard, cut away and release what needs to be released, ready, in preparation for the turning of the season. It is kind of a release, and it's kind of a rite of passage, I suppose, from maidenhood as well into
Mm.
adulthood.
And that square from Uranus really does push it along pretty quickly. I think that that will be pretty loud because they're both in Mercury's temples, one in Virgo, one in Gemini. And then that push, that speed of a square between those two mercurial planets now. Yeah, I think it'll just be amplified. That swift change is happening as the sun's light is also beginning to change.
I was thinking your analogy of the camping with the dropping away of the glamour, and you've got the south node there as well. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
release those sort of temporary. You can put your makeup on, but it comes off at night. It smears if it's left on too long. It's
Hmm.
it's very artificial, but where's the beauty underneath? Where's the inner
Yeah.
glow? And letting that come out and shine.
There's also the glory of coming home and, like, taking, like, a really long bath after that and finding the satisfaction of, like, scrubbing the grit. I bought this thing off Instagram, but it's this deep exfoliating glove that comes from some Canadian company that sells, like, sea moss sponges. Anyway, it's a deep exfoliation, and you only use it, like, once a week, but it's amazing at how much like just stuff we hold on to. I got it when the South Node went into Virgo, and I was like, this is so symbolic of just like ritually cleaning and scrubbing all of this old dead part of my body, myself, and just watching it, you know, go down the drain.
Yeah,
Very
I did a
satisfying.
therapist, and before we did fake tans, we had to exfoliate the skin, and you could always tell who exfoliated regularly and who didn't from the color of the water.
Yeah.
You could see, whether there was a buildup of those dead skin cells and work it was to do it. I just remember sort of those difference of shades.
Yeah, or even dry brushing. Dry brushing, you can get those bristly brushes and you kind of very lightly brush your skin towards your heart, and that stimulates the lymphatic system, and the lymphatic system helps drain all the stuff that we need to kind of purge through the body to keep us healthy, to keep us flowing, to keep us
Mm.
from getting sick. And so maybe this is a sign if you've never had a dry brush before, you can also just use the tips of your fingers or your fingernails, but dry brushing is excellent just to stimulate that natural detoxification system in our body, to stimulate lymph flow and to let go and it be that kind of that sort of health beauty routine while Venus is in Virgo. I've got my little Icelandic spirulina that I've been drinking, just going back to the gym, doing yoga, doing the exfoliation, trying to get better sleep, all those things. When Venus goes into Virgo, that is something that we can redirect and become a little bit more dutiful about. That I think when Venus is in Leo, it expresses differently. But when it goes into Virgo, it can be centered more of just like really tending and taking care in a real true, honest way of what is healthy for our bodies.
So focused on Venus, we've totally surpassed Mercury opposite Neptune. Did we cover that?
We mentioned it. I mean, Venus and Virgo squaring Uranus. I feel like we'll see it clearer
Yeah.
because things with Neptune are just really like they're hard to spot. Mercury opposite Neptune, like I would look just for my own practice, the dreams that lead up to that day and the days after.
Mhm.
As communicators with different styles of communication, Neptune and Mercury, they do have that astrologer signature to them, that occulted signature. So it'll happen very quickly because Mercury is going to move pretty quickly. But yeah, what other thoughts do you have on Mercury opposite
Yeah.
Neptune?
I'm just wondering if it's going to help us with the eclipses. I mean, Mercury isn't visible yet, not until the 24th. So we might not be able to tap into it fully, but it can help us like perceive patterns and connection and in our search for higher meaning, that kind of work that we do in astrology, finding those connections and patterns and cycles. But I always talk about that chthonic nature of the ocean. It always fascinates me that the billionaires are so stuck on searching the sky. And obviously our job is searching the sky, but there's so much on our planet in the ocean that's unknown. All these creatures that maybe are still undiscovered and the depths that we can't plumb. And it just reminds me of the Saturn ingress to Pisces and then
That
it turned and the
there
vessel,
was a submarine that imploded, and then there was the orcas attacking
the
the
orcas.
yachts.
Yeah. Yeah. So why
Yeah.
is all of this happening? Let's, get
Mm,
some answers to this and what's happening on our planets and
mhm.
in our oceans. So I hope maybe it'll be a prompt for some investment in our oceans because we're not looking after our oceans. We're filling them up with plastic and that upsets me as much as we're sending debris up into the sky as well. So I always do hope with a Neptune and Mercury aspect that there's going to be some new developments, some ideas as well coming forth, sort of in the mundane world as well. That could come through, but I like the idea that it's the mantras and the oracle, and that's kind of the archetype for it. Okay, so we got another busy page for the second half of the week. So yeah, really just lean into this week. While there's so much going on, it's hard to pull these strings apart of each individual transit, really, when there's so much of this going on. So yeah, just relax, let it all happen, and just notice and observe, I think. Especially when it's mutable, we've still got so much Mercury
Mhm.
going on. I think Mars's shift brings the fixed signs in. I think the fixed signs have kind of been able to duck their heads and go under the beams a bit for the moment. But Mars's movement is going to bring it in. And then Libra season is cardinal. So it's kind of like, okay, in the second half of this week, everybody's got something
Yep.
going on and something happening.
Just in time for the eclipse.
Yes. Of
Yeah,
course.
so Mercury opposing Neptune happens pretty much simultaneously when the sun opposes Saturn. And
Mm,
that's happening. The sun opposite Saturn is what's happening just the morning of the eclipse day. So on that Sunday, the sun in Virgo and Mercury's temple is going to oppose retrograde Saturn that has retrograded back into Pisces. It will be there until the spring next year when it moves back into Aries for its duration until it
mhm,
goes into Taurus. So we have this is the last time that the sun will oppose Saturn from Virgo here this time around. And it feels like the sun opposite Saturn on the day of the eclipse. I'm just thinking of them together. I'm thinking of them basically that's baked into the solar eclipse chart is that opposition to it. It will have just passed it slightly, but it's close enough. And the opposition is the aspect it's associated with Saturn. It's considered the strongest aspect because the conjunction isn't necessarily a sighted aspect, it's a blending of the energies. So, pretty loud for Saturn to oppose the sun the day it's eclipse. It's almost like, the sun and the moon are getting married, and there's this one character is like, but I have to talk to you first about something very, very serious. Luckily, Saturn isn't Jupiter's temple Pisces, and Jupiter is in a really great spot. Jupiter is at 21 degrees in Cancer, exalted. It's applying to a trine, right, to that Saturn. So at least there's that. It's much better than when Jupiter was in Gemini. It's just in a much more supportive position. Venus, the other ruler of Pisces, where Saturn is fallen over here in Virgo. So she's not in as much help. She's opposite by whole sign, but pretty far away. 2 degrees Venus opposing a 28-degree Saturn. It's just opposite by whole sign. So just the themes of the Virgo Pisces axis are in opposition to each other, but it's really the sun and the moon that are involved in this. The moon, not so much on the exact opposition when the sun is, but that whole day, both of them are going to be involved. And then you've got the nodes. That's why we have the eclipses, because the sun and the moon are close enough when they're at that full or new moon location, they're being eclipsed because they're crossing over that point. So it really is about the eclipse this whole week, even though there's plenty of other things going on. I'm excited to talk about Mars and Scorpio. I think that's like the best thing. But eclipses are these moments of pause, these ominous moments, auspicious moments where we see synchronicities. I don't know if it's just the way it expresses for me, but I have seen and always begin to see like little shadowy things in the corners of my peripheral vision during eclipses, like something is just there and I can't see what it is. And when I turn, it's gone. It happens a lot during eclipses. And it feels like a little bit of information is trying to get into my sight, but it's eclipsed by my distraction, or it's eclipsed by I'm not ready to understand it yet. But it's like these little peripheral Lilliputians or whatever that just kind of haunt me on the edges of my mind. It's just the eclipse really does influence all of that. What are your thoughts on the eclipse itself?
So this solar eclipse, what eclipses are, they happen when the moon, the earth and the sun are all lined up. The lunar eclipse, the earth shadow that was falling across the moon. And this time now it's the moon shadow that's passing between the earth and the sun, and it's blocking the sunlight from reaching the earth. So we have this time a partial solar eclipse. And that sometimes tells us where we are in the Saros series, because they start off as very small penumbral eclipses at one of the poles at either ends of the Earth. They get wider and wider as they reach the center of the Earth, and that's where we see the total eclipses. And at that time, they'll be very close to the nodes. And then they get smaller again as they approach the opposite side of the node. So this solar eclipse is series 154 in the solar eclipses, and the lunar eclipses are totally different numbers. So if you found 154 on a lunar eclipse, it wouldn't be the same as the solar eclipse 154. But Bernadette Brady wrote the book that we refer to, and she wrote her own classification series. And this came up, I attended Michelle Corbizio's workshop on Sarah's series, which I highly recommend to anybody. I don't think the recording's out yet, but when it is, if you missed it, she did 4 hours and a deep dive. And it came up about the Bernadette Brady book because she has her own classification series. And the information we now have from NASA, which is very extensive on all the dates and all the classifications. And apparently her book was written before we had all that information. It makes sense. This is why we still use it. And she did all this work on her own. And that's why it is the authoritative guide, because we didn't have the benefit of using both at the time. And I didn't know that. I just thought, okay, she's done her own thing. And we also have the Saros series, but this is why. So she classifies the pair, which is the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse that we're going through, both of the September eclipses, as '09 New South. So she looks at the astrology, the midpoints of both of them, and she finds themes of the astrology of the first eclipses. And she sees the themes as being concerned with bringing to the surface long-term worries about loved ones, health or responsibilities with paperwork. This series started in July 1917, so it's fairly new, because Eclipse Saros series can go on for millennia. They can have quite a long lifetime. So from 1917, 1935, 53, 71, 89, and then 2007. So I was around for 3 of those, and now this will be my 4th. So I was able to track some of the dates back.
It began in 1917.
Yeah.
So I just looking to see, like, one of the ways that you can look at an eclipse is like, where is it visible? Because it's not
Mm.
visible over for everyone, around the world. And this one particular is really only visible to New Zealand.
Yeah.
And so I just looked New Zealand news 1917, and a quick thing that came up was during the First World War, it was particularly devastating. The Battle of Passchendaele, which
Mhm.
resulted in New Zealand's darkest day on October 12th with the loss of 850 soldiers. And so if you look to see where it's visible, who it's kind of like what that influence is shining, what is it about New Zealand? Why are they the only place on earth that's really going to get a glimpse of this in
Mm.
person? And is it going to speak to something that has to do with their past? I mean, I just Googled it really quickly. I'm sure that if you looked at, some of the other dates, maybe you would find it. You would see where each eclipse was visible and how they might tie into each other. But for this year, for 2025, it's only visible to New Zealand. And then if you're in, just floating around the South Pacific somewhere,
Yep.
not even like Australia, the East Coast, the Sunshine Coast of Australia might see a little bit of it. But even the, you know, 10% of it looks like it's just off coast. So it's just kind of pinpointing to New Zealand. And yeah, it's eclipses. They're very mysterious. They're really, they pique the interest of people during eclipses. People that are not into astronomy or astrology get into it for that time because they sense like there is something else going on. What is going on? I want to know. everything's kind of being unsettled. And especially with the solar eclipse. So the lunar eclipse that we had on the 7th of September, when you think of the moon as the people or the masses, the lunar eclipse can speak to more about the fortune of the people. And the solar eclipse can really speak to the fortune of the solar figures in our life, whether it's prime ministers. I know that France, as of a day or two ago, is now going to be looking for a new prime minister, presidents, royalty, but just within our own communities, community leaders, CEOs, bosses, all of those people that kind of sit on top and have to like make decisions for the organizations that are below them. That is a solar figure. So solar eclipses really can speak to solar figures more than they do for just general masses of people. Doesn't mean that it doesn't affect the general masses of people because of the nature of what a solar figure is for humans. But I would just look to the solar eclipse as being a time of massive disruption and change and shifting of solar figures just across our world. Not necessarily just New Zealand, all around the world. But, I would be, if I was New Zealand's prime minister, I would probably put like a dummy, how like the kings would like replace themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and I saw in the news today that the Murdoch Empire have finally settled their succession.
Yeah.
That was really interesting because the Sun-Saturn opposition, I've sometimes spoken about that as like being a succession when that program was out. I was
Mm-hmm.
likening up, connecting that theory that who's going to succeed the father, the solar figure, as a
Mm-hmm.
Sun-Saturn thing. So to have, as we're approaching the Sun-Saturn, so they're coming into engagement now as we're recording, and to have that succession decided. But there's still other siblings who are unrivaled because apparently it's been decided in terms of political alliance that he had the same political views
Mm-hmm.
as his father, and therefore he's going to be the heir. But rather than on any other merit or any other decision.
Yeah, we should just say that we're recording this on Tuesday, September 9th. So the sun is at 17 degrees, 15 minutes Virgo, and Saturn is at 29 degrees, 23 minutes Pisces. So they're 12-ish degrees apart from each other. With these two, especially with an outer planet, you usually don't pay attention until it's a little closer. The sun, the sun moves a degree a day. Saturn is slow. So it's like the sun is within sight. It's like if the sun is at one corner on a block and you see Saturn like two corners ahead, you can start to kind of gauge, okay, well, what are they wearing? Do they have a weapon? Are they paying attention? Do they have headphones on? You can kind of get a little clearer view when you're 12 degrees away every single day as we get closer to this actual opposition on the eclipse day. That is definitely going to be an increase of the story. But yeah, when I saw that news come in, I was like, that does feel very Sun Saturn. So we've talked about the Sun in Virgo opposing Saturn and Pisces. We've talked about the solar eclipse. And then the thing that happens the next morning after the solar eclipse is that Mars will leave Libra and go home into Scorpio, finally injecting some domicile blood into the fixed axis. And as a Scorpio rising, I am welcoming Mars home, hopefully so that there's no injury to the self, but only just empowerment to the ideas.
What kind of water do you see Scorpion waters? I spend a lot of time thinking about this.
I think of salt marshes and tidal creeks. They hold the earth, but they have the type of plants and like mangrove trees and cypress trees and marshes that allow water to flow in and out because the tidal marshes and the tidal creeks and the salt marshes, they are the filtration system of the aquatic ecosystem. They collect trash, they collect dead carcasses of the animals that live there. They collect a lot of the toxins and they concentrate them down and they break them down and they compost them down to be the nutrients. It's so chthonic. It's so like Scorpio to be the nutrients, like the dead bodies become the nutrients for the new life. So it's fixed because there's enough plant material that holds it, and yet it has capacity for water to flow in and out, in and out. And there can be lots of still water within that, but it's dependent on the oceans bringing in the tides each day and taking them away. So I think of it, I grew up on a salt marsh with tidal creeks. It's not just swamp because like a swamp is a different type of ecosystem. To me, it's that edge where the water from the ocean meets the land and that middle liminal space where it is full of creepy things, alligators, at least, where I grew up as alligators and lizards and venomous snakes and spiders and raccoons and possums and dripping moss and, spiky plants. And it was just it was like it could be like a nightmare if you didn't know what it was, but it was so rich in life. That filtration of the water, that stillness and the slow movement. That's what I imagine for Mars and Scorpio.
So perfect. I love that because that alchemy is such an important part of the stories of the decans of
Hmm.
Scorpio.
Yeah.
All those hidden things that are there that you can't see at first sight.
Yeah, that looks scary up front. You might hear a rattlesnake, but then realize it's just the cattails moving around. It's like that it wasn't a rattlesnake at all. It was just this really cute puffy plant. Yeah, so Mars will be at home. And when we think about all the planets that, have been home and they're leaving, so, Mercury was in Virgo for a while, now it's in Libra. Venus, is it going home to Libra? But right now it's fallen in Virgo. Saturn is quite a ways away from being at home again.
Mm.
It's got plenty of years before it's at home again. Jupiter's exalted, but it's got a ways before it's in a domicile again. And so whenever a planet goes home, there's just familiarity. There's like things happen in the way that we're kind of accustomed to it. They're empowered. Their significations can be easily expressed in the ways that we understand it. And Mars, it is about action and, taking charge and making change. So much about Mars is also to defend and honor and fight for the things that you care about. And to me, that's important for a Mars to be in good shape so that we are capable of standing up for and fighting for authenticity and truth, which is a very Scorpio thing. It's a very Marsy thing too. And so I'm looking forward to Mars being home just because it's nice when a planet's at home. I almost prefer a planet at home than an exalted planet sometimes because an exalted planet can kind of like have a little bit more of an inflated idea of what its capabilities are. It depends on the help from others, but when it's at home, you can just get down and just take care of things. And because the world is disrupting right in front of our eyes, as it always is, but the older you get, you're like, man, I wish things were the way that they were. It has proven to be useful and functional. And Mars in Scorpio is like a functional, empowered, knows how to get shit done Mars. And I'm looking forward to that because I'm Scorpio rising. Mars rules my ascendant. And I just like to be able to function and get things done in a way that I don't have to ask help from other people to get it done. I just want to, make it happen. And so for that, I'm happy for Mars to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, same as somebody approaching their Mars return. Same reasons, just being able to
Yeah.
do things myself. Yeah, I was thinking when you were saying about the exaltations there, I know Austin Coppock talks about exaggeration with exaltations, that it can be that overblown nature. And yet the domicile planet has those duties and responsibilities that keeps it humble and occupied. Whereas an exaltation planet can get bored and cause trouble
Yeah.
and make demands and have expectations, unrealistic expectations, maybe.
Yeah. I have a Taurus moon. I know all about that. But that morning that Mars goes into Scorpio, I think it's funny that then almost like 12 hours later, the sun goes into Libra. So it's like that same day, like there's this quick shift. And as soon as the sun goes into Libra, it's going to oppose that Neptune that's over there still in Aries. Even though it's retrograde, it's going to be a little bit more time before it retrogrades back. Again, this cardinal equinox season, when all of these planets, all these quicker planets change signs, we get these new aspects because the sun going into Libra trines Uranus immediately. It trines Pluto immediately. So yes, it's opposing Neptune, but it also is plugging into that air power grid of Neptune and Pluto, Uranus and Pluto that are in air signs. So it also kind of gets to connect with that wind energies of those air
Mm.
planets.
Yeah, it's a grand trine, isn't it? Which is really rather nice, an air grand trine.
Yeah, I feel like it'll be swift and exciting and social. Air signs are social. They like to communicate and have parties. And the 21st is a Sunday. So this is a Wednesday, the 23rd, or Tuesday. Maybe it'll be just like an impromptu, community gathering or work party or something that happens where you feel it. You're like, I have the energy. I'm just going to show up for that. Like just Mars will be in Scorpio, the sun plugging into that power source of Pluto and the instigator of Uranus. I think it'll be kind of like a fun, bright, quick, electrifying sort of a day.
That sound nice.
We should mention the sun exalts in Aries. So the sun is fallen in Libra. To me, the sun fallen in Libra just means that the Libra suns that I know have a hard time just being with themselves. They want to socialize. They want to be around other people. They want to bounce ideas off other people. That fallen nature of that sense of self is, how are you with other people? It's like the identity is kind of tied into that. And so even more reason where I feel like the invitation to be social and to share fate and share time might be even more amplified when the sun is in Libra, connected immediately to those two outers. But all of Libra season, it's that nature of the sun being exalted in the opposite sign of Aries. When it's in Libra, it does have a different expression of solar light.
And symbolically, it's taking us into that turn of the wheel. And we've gone from these summer months, Virgo is the fading of the light, and now we're into this place where darkness is starting to take over from the light. And we're moving into that fall, autumn season. We've had a very dry summer, so the leaves are already falling from the trees and going brown because of the lack of water. So
Mm-hmm.
it's already happening, but usually this time, the Libra season would be the time that we see it starting to happen.
Mm.
But yeah, it's the next three movements of the sun. We're really preparing for the darkness of the winter months. So symbolically, it's like that preparation and just getting ready and realizing, okay, the darkness is with us now.
Mm.
And we start to prepare to hibernate, retreat, slow down a little from the outwardness of the summer months.
There's something about Libra that reminds me of herringbone, the black and white herringbone
Mm,
pattern.
yeah.
It's usually because it's wool. And so in the Northern Hemisphere, Libra season, you start to just layer up a little bit more. But just something about that staggered black and white of herringbone, it's like that real stark contrast of the beginning of Libra season, the quality of light, the beginning of it versus the end where we're like approaching Halloween, how the light is so different during that for us in the Northern Hemisphere. Libra season also, I feel like, has the best light for sunsets because of the angle of the earth, the way that the sun goes. It just makes things so, so incredibly beautiful. And the shadows that it casts, it's just the sun is in its fall. So it acts differently than it does when it's just head over, during the summer or that really beautiful, sweet spring light like in Aries. Yeah, I just wanted to throw out Libra also is ruled by Venus, which is, we think of fashion and expression and adornment. And I'm going to make a deliberate effort to find some herringbone pattern to wear for the Libra season, maybe just a
Libra
little
season.
scarf.
Yeah. I wonder if that's the Saturn's exalted.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder if that's like the Venus and the Saturn pull.
Compromise. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. And also, really, the whole sign opposition to Neptune the whole time the sun's in Libra, that's going to be like a new experience for us. I don't think we've had Sun in Libra opposite Neptune.
Mm-mm. Not in
Certainly,
our lifetime.
no. So this is going to be a new experience of Neptune. Like
Mm-hmm.
the sun opposing Neptune is going to be something we're going to be able to really feel into when the sun illuminates something for us. So when the sun's opposing Neptune, that's going to be a real way to feel into how does this feel for us? What is this being shown for us? The sun is that planet that illuminates everything for us. So it might be a good time to connect with Neptune, even though the actual transit of the sun exactly opposite is very short and quick.
Yeah.
But the whole sign opposition is going to last for that whole month.
Yeah, it was the 1860s, the last time that Neptune was in Aries. So that was the last time. I don't think any of us were alive then.
No,
Maybe not in this incarnate body.
no. No, but it might bring memories back being Neptune. It
Mhm.
might bring past life memories back, maybe.
Maybe you'll start to read an author that wrote
From
during that
Neptune.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, how wonderful. But yeah, wonderful things might happen. Let's see what gets unlocked. I mean, we'd have had Neptune oppositions when it was in Pisces
Hmm.
from Virgo, but we haven't had it from Libra.
I thought of Nathaniel Hawthorne, and he died in 1864. I wonder, because I haven't read him in a very long time. Maybe I'll read some Nathaniel Hawthorne during this transit.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if films start getting made or,
Oh, yeah.
they come
Hmm.
into the general consciousness.
Yeah, really brilliant idea of the screenplay that
Mm,
is kind of seeded around this week, this eclipse week.
yeah. Yeah, because we've got all those there are so many historical things that are doing so well that I can't think of any of the names of at the moment.
I like Bridgerton
Yeah,
and
that's it.
Downton Abbey, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that do so well, so there's no reason why not. Let's get to
Here's
work
your
on that.
sign if you have this idea that you wanted to write some sort of fictional period piece.
Yeah, an astrologer told you first.
Yes, directly to your
This is your
face.
time. Yeah, because Venus loves to bring people together and the air sign, the idea, and yeah, go off and write that script. You've got Mercury in Libra, you're good to go.
I like Mercury in Libra. I think it's
Yeah.
a nice poetic
Mm,
sense of justice for sure, expressing a sense of justice. But I think I like it for poets as well.
yeah. Yeah, it's just bringing those words to that connection and the justice and yeah, especially with for that short time that Mars is there as well. The activist Mars in Libra. Okay, so have we done
I think that wraps the week. Yeah.
fantastic. I'm just going to remind everybody that, as Krista said at the beginning, we did a live event for the eclipses. So, if things we've talked about with the solar eclipse coming up have sparked your curiosity, we have had the live event, but that's still no reason you have to miss out if you've got FOMO, because we've got a workbook. It's over 40 pages of everything eclipses, and it's all aimed at the Pisces Virgo eclipses that we're in right now. So it's very specific to just these eclipses, telling you everything you need to know to work it out for your own chart, telling you more about the Saros cycles and also introducing the metatonic cycles as well. So you can figure those out for yourselves. There's tables of dates. There's more information about everything it means. There's rituals that Krista's written for you. What else is in there in the workbook?
Yeah, there's lots of just general prompts. We have it so that you can print it if you want, or you can just kind of follow along in your own journal to
Mm,
then make a plan for the future, to reflect back on the past, to think about the present, and start to kind of weave all of that in so that you have a bit more clarity of where this eclipse is happening for you. You know, what are the influences of this eclipse? How is that impacting your chart? Is it impacting your chart very directly? Maybe it's impacting your partner's or your child's. I mean, you can kind of plug in a natal chart into this workbook to kind of get an expectation of how it's going to express. Because again, in the moment of the eclipse, it might think, oh, well, nothing happened. But rarely is that the case. Usually it just, the story unfolds over a longer period of time. And so having something like the workbook that we made, it's good to kind of put in your own information into it and then start to then draw a picture of maybe it's going to be this. And if it working through the workbook or listening to the recording of the event stirs up something, I would pay attention to that and use that as a prompt for the journal, because eclipses are disruptive. Myth is about churning up the ocean looking for the elixirs of life. And so that's what the workshop and the workbook are, is like churning it up to see like what's floating to the surface. What is your concern? What is your worry? What is your hope? What are you wanting to realize? What are you wanting to let go? What story are you tired of telling yourself or tired of living through? How do you want to redirect it? All of that, all of it's going to get disrupted anyway. And having something to help guide you to take the reins where you can and have a bit more clarity of how to go forward involves having the clarity of what happened in the past and what's happening right now, so that you can kind of just be empowered and make the changes that you want to see. You know, we get chances all the time to change our lives, to kind of level up. And I think that eclipses are a great excuses to kind of sit and see and get a lay of the land before you go back out into the world with whatever changes that you want to make. So if that interests you at all, it's definitely worth the cost. It's very affordable. I think it's like $22. And you have the recording and then you have your own insights for life if you use it. And we're going to do it again for the final eclipse that's happening in the spring, and this will be the third of this series. So you can have access if you want. You can purchase the workbook for all three, or you can get the recordings for all three once we get through them all. But just as an excuse or a practice to really use these times to use astrology for self empowerment, for self compassion, for direction of life, for all of the things that we like to use astrology for. I think eclipses are just really powerful moments to make the choice to make those changes.
absolutely. So yeah, Don't miss out and just check out our Asterai Sophia Kairos shop, which is on Ko-fi.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes for this so that it'll be easy click. I encourage you to do it. I mean, there's a reason why we made this. We're doing this for ourselves anyway.
Yeah.
And that's usually a good sign. If an astrologer makes something for themselves and then wants to share it, they put some thought into it.
That's right. Yeah, we're all learning as we're doing it. And we'll be back with you next week, a much more quieter week where you can put the brakes on and just reflect a little bit. Thank you, Krista from Practical Astros, and I'm Sonia from Celestial Astrology. If you've enjoyed this, please remember to like, subscribe, comment. It really helps us as a small channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.